All right, so let's dive into this December 2024 PPI report, huh? Lots of you out there have been sending in questions about rising costs, and, well, we hear you.
Absolutely. And I think this PPI report gives us a pretty interesting place to start, to kind of unpack some of that.
Yeah, I mean, the PPI, it's basically our sneak peek into inflation's playbook, right?
Exactly. It's tracking what producers are paying for their goods and services, which, down the line can give us a hint of what consumers might see at their end.
Like an early warning system, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And this early warning system, it just flashed, well, maybe a yellow light. Not quite red, but
Right.
the PPI for December, it went up, but not as much as everyone expected.
Yeah.
0.2% compared to November. So,
Yeah. I mean, that's a good thing, right?
yeah.
I think a lot of people saw that and were like, ooh, 0.2, it's still going up, but it's less than we expected, which suggests that, maybe inflation is starting to cool down a bit.
Okay, so that's good news, right?
Yeah.
But like any good mystery,
Sure.
there are always more layers,
Yeah. Yeah.
of course,
Yeah.
to this. So let's peel back another layer,
Absolutely.
So the data shows that the core PPI, which, for anyone who's not familiar, that takes out the food and energy prices, which can be super volatile, they jump around.
Right. Exactly.
But the core PPI actually stayed flat in December.
Yeah.
And this is fascinating to me because experts predicted a 0.3% increase.
Yeah. So that's where it really gets interesting, right? I mean, because that flatlining of the core PPI, it tells us a lot about, well, what's really going on, like underneath the surface, right?
So it's not just holiday shopping sprees, driving up the prices.
No, no, not at all. It suggests, maybe some of the supply chain issues that have been plaguing, everyone, really.
Oh, for sure.
They might be easing a bit.
Okay, so maybe those kinks are working themselves out.
Yeah, and that's, ultimately that's a positive sign, right? I
Yeah.
mean, for businesses, for consumers,
That's
everybody.
less of a bottleneck.
Exactly.
Okay, but the report also mentioned, and, got to look at this, the year-over-year increase in the PPI is projected to be around 3.4%.
Yeah.
Which, that's still a pretty significant jump, isn't it?
It is, absolutely, yeah. It's important to keep that bigger picture in mind, right? I mean, yes, 3.4% is down from what we saw, at the peak earlier this year, but it's still higher than, what the Federal Reserve, their target is 2% inflation.
Right, so we're still above that target.
Exactly.
Okay, so what does all of this mean for, for you, for me, for everyone listening? What do we do with this information?
Well, I think one of the biggest things to keep an eye on is how the Federal Reserve reacts to this data, right? I mean, this could really influence their interest rate decisions in the next few months.
Yeah, because they've been on this, raising interest rates.
Exactly. And so, this might give them pause, right? Or maybe not. We'll see. But I think for your own planning, for business planning, this slower PPI growth, it might be a sign that, those crazy price increases that we were seeing, they're starting to, to stabilize a little bit.
Right, okay, so maybe a little more predictability.
Yeah, exactly. We're not, flying blind as much as we were, maybe.
Okay, so that's a good thing, right? Gives us a little bit of breathing room.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so we've got this, this PPI data, but how does this actually connect with, the other big one, the Consumer Price Index, the CPI?
Oh, that's a great question, right? Because, the CPI is measuring those prices from, the consumer's perspective, right? So watching how the CPI trends compared to the PPI, it gives us a much clearer picture of, well, are those producer price changes actually being passed on to us at the store?
Right, so we could see the producers are paying more, but if those prices aren't going up for us as consumers, that means that maybe those businesses are absorbing some of those costs.
Yeah, exactly. They might be eating some of that, to stay competitive, to keep their customers.
Wow. Okay, so much to think about with all of this, but I guess, if we had to boil it all down to like one key takeaway for today, what would it be? What would you say?
Well, I think this December PPI report, it's like a little, glimmer of hope, right? It suggests that maybe, just maybe, inflation is starting to, to lose a little bit of steam. It's not this runaway train anymore.
Right. Okay, so maybe it's slowing down.
Yeah, but, and this is a big, but, we got to keep watching, right? We got to see how the Fed reacts. We got to see what happens with the CPI. And, ultimately, all of this data, it's just one piece of a much bigger puzzle.
Okay, so we're not out of the woods yet.
Not quite, but, at least it looks like we might be heading in the right direction.
Okay, so keep an eye on everything. So much good stuff here today. And, as always, We like to leave everyone with one final thought, something to ponder. And I think today's thought is, if this trend of easing inflation, if it continues, what new opportunities, what new doors might open up in your industry, as those costs start to become more predictable? Something to really think about.
Yeah,
So much
absolutely.
to think about. So keep diving deep, everyone.
Keep diving.
And we'll see you next time.
See you then.